Darcy. She is the most beautiful creature I ever beheld.
Hi, welcome to another video. It is a miserable, rainy day out there. I've got Charlie here. What are we going to do with you? Driving me crazy, it really is. I want to do video production and Cat wants to sit in front of me and purr. Now, there are a few characters in Pride and Prejudice that are as universally liked as Charles Bingley. Did you see what I did there? Universally. His warmth and good nature win over the hearts of readers and characters alike, but perhaps beneath his charm lies a story of family, friendship, and love that deserve a closer look. Who is Charles Bingley? What drives his choices and what makes him such an essential part of Jane Austen's most famous work? In this video, I'll explore his character, his relationships, and his role in the novel's themes. Bingley is introduced as a wealthy young man of good fortune with an income of £5,000 a year, which is a substantial amount, though not quite the level of Darcy's £10,000. His wealth is derived from his father's business ventures, likely in trade or manufacturing, as Jane Austen subtly makes reference to the family's background in commerce. Unlike Darcy, who belongs to the landed gentry, Bingley represents the upwardly mobile new money, which could explain his sister's social ambitions and insecurities about their own status.
Allow me the pleasure of welcoming you to our little assembly here.
Sir William, I'm very glad to see you.
In the 1995 adaptation, Bingley's good-natured charm and openness are immediately apparent when he arrives at Netherfield. The contrast between his jovial disposition and Darcy's reserved arrogance is heightened during the Meryton Assembly Ball. Bingley dances enthusiastically and engages with everyone, while Darcy stands aloof, refusing to dance. These early scenes establish Bingley as a man of warm, easy manners, who is unaffected by the class consciousness that defines other characters, including his sisters. He even declares Jane Bennet to be the most beautiful creature he's ever seen.
Darcy, she is the most beautiful creature I ever beheld.
Which of course sets the stage for their budding romance. Now, Bingley's decision to rent Netherfield rather than purchase an estate is another interesting detail. It reflects both his youth and his indecision, as well as his sister's aspirations for him to acquire a grander property. The novel tells us that Bingley plans to leave the responsibility of buying an estate to a future generation. And this comment about leaving the responsibility, about purchasing the estate for a future generation, could be interpreted as a lack of seriousness about societal expectations, which again contrasts with Darcy's more traditional duty-bound mindset. Bingley's disposition and good nature are his defining traits. He's kind, sociable and optimistic and eager to please, which makes him immediately likeable. However, his easygoing nature also makes him susceptible to influence, particularly from people he respects, like Darcy, or those he feels obliged to, like his sisters. This quality is most evident in the subplot involving Jane Bennet. In the scene at Netherfield, when Jane is ill, the 1995 adaptation beautifully illustrates the dynamic between Darcy and Bingley and his sisters.
Their uncle, she told us, is in trade and lives in Cheapside.
Perhaps we should call when we are next in town.
While Caroline Bingley mocks the Bennet family for their lack of propriety and social standing, Bingley defends them, stating that he finds the Bennets to be very agreeable.
They would be just as agreeable to me had they uncles enough to fill all Cheapside.
With such connections, they can have very little chance of marrying well, Bingley.
His warmth and respect for others, regardless of their social position, stand in stark contrast to the elitism of his sisters and the aloofness of Darcy. However, this same scene hints at how easily Bingley can be influenced. While he defends the Bennets, he doesn't directly challenge Darcy or Caroline, foreshadowing how their opinions will later sway him. His malleability is most evident when Darcy convinces him that Jane doesn't truly love him. Despite his genuine affection for Jane, Bingley trusts Darcy's judgment over his own instincts, which leads him to abandon Netherfield without explanation. This moment highlights both his vulnerability as well as his deep trust in Darcy. Bingley's reaction to Jane Bennet at the Meryton Assembly is one of the clearest examples of love at first sight in Austen's work. Upon meeting her, he is captivated, calling her the most beautiful creature he's ever seen. In the 1995 adaptation, this moment is particularly well portrayed, as Bingley's admiration is real.
You have been dancing with the only handsome girl in the room.
His enthusiasm and body language make it clear he's completely smitten. The contrast between Bingley's instant attraction and Darcy's dismissive remark about Elizabeth being only tolerable underscores the different ways the two men approach relationships.
She is tolerable, I suppose. But she's not handsome enough to tempt me.
Bingley's openness to emotion and willingness to act on his feelings are central to his character, and this scene serves as a perfect illustration of his romantic nature. The scene also highlights the difference between Bingley and Darcy's approaches to romance. While Bingley is open, expressive, and willing to act on his feelings, Darcy holds himself back. These contrasting reactions set the tone for their respective romantic arcs. Bingley and Darcy's relationship is one of mutual respect despite their differing social backgrounds and temperaments. While Jane Austen doesn't provide details about how they became friends, their dynamic suggests that Bingley values Darcy's intellect and steadiness, while Darcy admires Bingley's warmth and affability.
Have I your approval? You'll find the society something savage. Country manners. I think they're charming. You better take it. I shall. I shall close with the attorney directly.
However, this friendship is not without its complications. Darcy's strong personality often overshadows Bingley's gentler nature. Bingley's reliance on Darcy's opinion is evident. There is a trust between the two men, but also the imbalance of power in their relationship. And this imbalance is most evident when Darcy persuades Bingley to leave Netherfield, claiming that Jane doesn't truly care for him.
His partiality was clear, but though she received his attentions with pleasure, I did not detect any symptoms of peculiar regard.
Bingley's trust in Darcy is so deep that he accepts his judgment without question, even though it causes him great personal pain. Yet their friendship is built on genuine affection. Darcy's eventual regret for interfering in Bingley's relationship with Jane shows that he values Bingley's happiness, and his efforts to reunite the couple demonstrate the respect for their bond.
I should never have interfered. It was very wrong of me, Bingley, and I apologise.
The relationship between Bingley and Jane is perhaps the purest representation of love in Pride and Prejudice. Their relationship represents the idealised form of romantic love in the novel. Their courtship lacks the tension and misunderstanding that define Darcy and Elizabeth's relationship, but this simplicity is part of its charm because their love is based on mutual attraction and respect, rather than social advantage or manipulation.
The engagement between them is of a peculiar kind. From their infancy they have been intended for each other.
Their compatibility is evident in the way that they interact. Both are gentle, kind, and good-natured, and in the 95 adaptation, their scenes together are filled with warmth and smiles. Their marriage is also an important counterpoint to the other unions in the novel. Darcy and Elizabeth's union is based on overcoming pride and prejudice, symbolising personal growth and mutual respect. Could be a good title for a book, that. Lydia and Wickham's union is a marriage of impulse and folly, representing the consequences of poor judgment. We also have Charlotte and Mr. Collins. Now, this is a pragmatic marriage, which Jane Austen uses as a means of highlighting the economic responsibilities for women of the time. In contrast to all of these, Bingley and Jane's union is based on genuine love and compatibility. It stands as a critique of societal norms that prioritise status over happiness, showing that true love can be found when love takes precedence. Now for the history bit. I'd like to explore for a minute the concept of new money that I referred to earlier concerning Bingley's wealth. So for you three viewers that are watching, please bear with me. Don't click off yet. The concept of new money isn't a modern phenomenon. Now, I thought it was linked to the term with the 1980s and the emergence of yuppies, but on further reading, during the Regency period, let's say 1811 to 1820, as well as the broader Georgian era, Britain was undergoing significant economic and social change, largely due to the Industrial Revolution, which began mid-18th century and then continued into the 19th century. Now, this period saw the rise of wealthy individuals who did not come from aristocratic or land-owning backgrounds, but instead made their fortunes through trade, manufacturing, and finance. Bingley's wealth comes from his father's business. Jane Austen never specified the exact nature of the business in her novel, but it was common for wealthy men outside of aristocracy to make their fortunes in textiles, possibly shipping and trade, and also banking and investments. So this distinction between landed gentry, defined as old inherited wealth, and rising merchant class, new wealth, was a major societal shift in the Regency era. The British economy was diversifying, and it was becoming more possible for someone without a noble lineage to become very wealthy. It was astute of Jane Austen to provide social commentary in her novel on this very significant change. She didn't just write a novel about aristocrats, but interwove the lives of the then modern phenomena of this new money. That being said, despite their wealth, families like the Bingleys faced social obstacles. They had a lack of aristocratic heritage. Unlike Darcy, whose family wealth came from generations of land ownership, Bingley's father was a businessman. The aristocracy and landed gentry often looked down on trade, seeing it as vulgar or grubby, despite the fact that it was making people very rich. This is something that Caroline and Louisa seem to lose sight of, but I'll cover them in a different video. The ultimate sign of old wealth was owning land, which symbolised stability, legacy and respectability. Bingley rents Netherfield rather than buying it, which suggests he is still in transition. His family is rich, but he's not yet established as landed gentry, compared with Darcy, whose estate has been in the family for generations. So how does this connect to Pride and Prejudice? Well, Jane Austen subtly critiques the class prejudices of her time. Bingley, despite his wealth and good nature, is still socially inferior to Darcy and must work harder to be accepted. Caroline Bingley's snobbish behaviour shows how some individuals from new money families tried to align themselves with the old aristocracy rather than embrace their merchant roots. Darcy's eventual acceptance of Bingley's marriage to Jane, as well as his own to Elizabeth, reflects a shift towards valuing character over class. So Bingley's character raises fascinating questions about class, influence and societal expectations. I have a few questions that have niggled me for a bit, and I'd love to hear your comments on these, so be sure to leave a comment below and join in the conversation. Question 1. Would Bingley have eventually returned for Jane on his own? We know that Darcy ultimately reunites Bingley with Jane, but if Darcy hadn't stepped in, would Bingley have had the courage to return to Netherfield, or would he simply accept that Jane wasn't meant to be? Was he too trusting in Darcy's judgment, or was he just too hesitant to act on his own? What do you think? What if Bingley had been as strong-willed as Darcy. Bingley is often seen as the opposite of Darcy. Where Darcy is reserved and headstrong, Bingley is open and easily influenced. But what if Bingley had stood up against his sisters and Darcy's interference? Would this have made the story more compelling? And would his relationship with Jane have had more depth if it had faced stronger challenges? Do Bingley and Jane lack depth compared to Elizabeth and Darcy? Some people see Bingley and Jane as a bit too perfect, too kind-hearted, lovely people who fall in love without conflict. But does that make them less interesting, or does their gentle romance serve as an important contrast to Elizabeth and Darcy's more tumultuous love story? What do you think? Do Bingley and Jane feel too simple, or are they exactly what the novel needs? How does Bingley's relationship with his sisters compare to Darcy's relationship with Georgiana? Darcy, as we know, is fiercely protective over his sister, whereas Bingley's sisters seem to manipulate and control him. Why do you think that is? Is it because Darcy holds more authority as the head of his family, while Bingley is seen as the baby brother? His sisters can still influence, or is it simply that Bingley is too kind to push back against them? How would Bingley have coped with the scandal of Lydia's elopement? If Darcy hadn't intervened to solve the Wickham scandal, would Bingley have still married Jane? Or would the disgrace of Lydia's elopement have been enough to keep him away? Would his sisters have convinced him that Jane's family was too scandalous, or would Bingley's kind heart have made him overlook it? Does Bingley's wealth make him more desirable than his personality? Would the Bennet family have been just as eager for Bingley if he weren't so rich? We know Mrs. Bennet is fixated on his £5,000 a year, but would Jane have fallen for him anyway? How much of Bingley's appeal comes from his personality and how much from his fortune? It's an interesting one, this, because the importance of his wealth is what drives Mrs. Bennet to push Jane towards him and, as such, have them formally introduced. Without the Netherfield ball or even Mr. Bennet making Bingley's acquaintance, I'm not sure how Jane could have met him. What do you think? Finally, how does Bingley compare to Austen's other suitors? Jane Austen created many different types of romantic heroes, from the brooding Mr. Darcy to the charming Henry Tilney and, of course, the honourable Colonel Brandon. Where do you think Bingley fits in among them? Is he too soft compared to the others, or does his warmth make him stand out? I'd love to hear your thoughts on my questions. Comment below. Closing thoughts then. Charles Bingley may not have had the complexity of Darcy or Elizabeth, but his role in Pride and Prejudice is just as significant. His kindness, his love for Jane, and his friendship with Darcy add depth to Austen's exploration of relationships and class. Now, have I missed anything about Charles Bingley that you think is important? If so, leave a comment below and let's continue the discussion. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Kind of never like saying it, but it does help the channel, especially as I have still got a few more Pride and Prejudice character analysis to cover. I've got the Bingley sisters, the Gardners, the Lucases, and of course Darcy and Elizabeth, and they're all coming soon. I don't think I'll cover Hill and even is it Dawkins? Have a care, Dawkins. Anyway, that was my thoughts on Charles Bingley. A rather nice character. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.